I'd love to hear the story of how Nectar was founded, how you got involved. You said earlier on that I feel like I make great hires, which, hopefully that continues to be the case. Yeah. But I think that's integral at a startup, especially. And then, it gets even more important because once somebody who could poison the business gets in deep and gets to a higher level because of, I'm not saying you're the poison, but because of nepotism or favoritism or whatever reason, I've seen it happen at companies where like, oh, they're a director or they're a VP, and their whole department or whole team is underperforming, or whatever it is. And so I think that becomes even more important to make those good hires. So I'd love to hear the story of, from your perspective, how Nectar got started and like what the mission is there.
Yeah. So Nectar has a longer history than what most people think. Most people think that we got started in 2020 or 2021, but it actually goes back a little bit further than that. So my brother-in-law, Trevor Larson, he's our CEO. He was detailing cars. He had moved up from Arizona to Utah, detailing cars to make some money. He and my sister were dating. They got married, and that was his job, was to detail cars while he was going through school. He wanted to be an orthodontist, and so he actually would get contracts with Qualtrics and Vivint and some other players in Utah County to say, hey, we're going to come by, we're going to detail cars, and we'll do it on site. Can you pass around the sign-up sheet? Yeah. So they would get the sign-up sheet, and they would go detail cars, and oftentimes I would go help him because he's like, hey, we've got X amount of cars today. We need to get them all done. Yeah,
I can't do 50 cars in 2 hours.
Exactly. So I think maybe max was like 8 cars a day or something like that. Okay. We'd start early in the morning and then end late. 5 when people would go home. And so we're detailing cars. He's always been super entrepreneurial. Wanting to start little businesses here and there. You remember those like Zorb balls where people get in them and they go hit each other? Yeah. Yeah, he started a franchise like that, and
sounds like it went really well.
Didn't go very well. I helped him run it a few times, and he's always just trying things out and doing things. And he called me up one time and said, hey, I have this idea. One of the many, right?
Right. It was not the first time he said this.
Not the first time he said this. I have this idea. We go on site to these companies and we detail their cars. And we also offer rock chip repairs. And we could offer a slew of other things too. There's lots of on-site, lots of companies that will come on site to perform services, haircuts, oil changes, fill up your gas.
Yeah, I got a DEXA scan in my last company's parking lot.
Exactly.
It was cool.
Exactly. So he's like, what if we put together an app or some sort of software package where we package all these things up, and then we go sell it to a company and kind of offer this as a service to say, hey, here you go, you can do these. And then it kind of iterated from there to be, Vivint or Qualtrics. They had all of these amazing benefits already, or perks as we called them, because the company negotiated them with all these businesses around. So if you were an employee, you got a special perk or discount in a lot of places. So then it kind of evolved into like, okay, let's create something with on-site services plus all your company perks in there, so you can, as an employee, understand what you have access to, what you don't have access to. Because most employees have no clue.
Right.
My brother just had a baby, and he works at JP Morgan, and he found out, they'll give us a snoo. I don't know if you know what a snoo is. It's like this automated bassinet that when the baby cries, it will automatically start like
that's
rocking
crazy.
And stuff. It's very cool. But he's like, I had no clue about this. Somebody just told me randomly. And so Trevor had that same experience at Qualtrics, where people had no clue the benefits or the perks that were available to them. So he wanted to create a place where those could be centrally located and then sell that software as a service to those companies. So he went out. Well, actually, he said, what do you think of this idea? Do you want to do it with me? And I said, no.
No, good luck.
Yeah, I said,
I hope it works out.
Candidly, I don't know if I said this out loud or in the back of my mind, but I didn't think it was a very good idea.
Yeah.
For a number of reasons. But he said, I'm going to go do it. And props to him. He went and did it. And he was teaching himself how to code. I was in school at the time studying information technology, so I was writing a lot of code at the time. So he taught himself these things, but ultimately he found the people necessary to help him. Got a couple co-founders, found a technical person to help code, and they built an app and they started selling it. And props to them, they got some really big accounts like doTERRA, Entrada, Qualtrics, some really nice big accounts. And it was like, we got a real product here, off to the races. And that did well, decently well, but it kind of stalled. And they said, we knew we didn't have product market fit when the customer with the most usage decided to cancel. And it was like, oh man, if the customer with the most usage isn't going to renew, we don't have product market fit here.
Right.
So then kind of came this iteration cycle of going back to the customers to say like, well, what do you need? What are some needs there? And the customer for the Perk, it was called Perk Now. The Perk product was HR teams because they generally manage perks and benefits. So we kind of came back to them and said, what do you need? And it was like, well, we have these gift cards and we go out and we go buy a bunch, but it's kind of a pain to kind of keep track of them, and they're all on spreadsheets. And so they decided to create a software product for that where you could give certain managers a balance, and then the managers could send out gift cards virtually to their employees. But the beautiful part about it was the employees actually got to choose what gift card they wanted.
Oh, sweet.
Because if a Petco gift card was the last one in the drawer and I gave you a Petco gift card and you're like, well, thanks, but I don't have a pet.
Yeah, I'm not going to Petco.
That's
like,
lame.
do they have a Snickers bar at checkout? Like, maybe I'll get that.
Yeah, maybe, right? So that's kind of the next iteration of it. And that worked out well. And that was kind of, hey, we have more rewards that we want to send through here.
And were you there at this stage?
I'm not there at this stage.
Okay.
But I'm very familiar with it because Trevor and I lived basically right next door to each other.
Okay.
And so we're constantly talking about this stuff. And then it kind of evolved into, well, what about adding recognition in there? Because we're having trouble recognizing employees. So that was kind of that final iteration. And that was the time, I guess, backing up a little bit, they went into recognition. They added recognition to the rewards. And that's kind of where that magic happened, that product market fit happened. However, that wasn't known until a little bit later because we're building this whole platform. And this is the transition from Perk Now to Nectar. And they launched in February of 2020. So they launched, and the launch went well, but COVID hit.
Yeah, what happened in March 2020?
And everyone was just like, pause, hit the brakes on everything. We're not buying anything new. We don't know what's going on. Global recession, right? And so I got pretty nervous for Trevor at that time. I was like, oh man,
he's about to really live next door.
This is
in my on my couch.
This could be really bad.
Yeah.
Luckily, kind of they weathered the storm through that time period, through the summer. And then people started recognizing that, hey, we're not connected to our employees anymore. We're remote. It's kind of hard to maintain the company culture that we have had. That water cooler talk is not happening anymore. And so how can we replace that in a virtual world? And so they naturally turned to recognition and rewards. And it kind of became that water cooler and that place where people could say things. You could send a shout out to somebody and everybody else would see it and be like, oh man, that was so cool that Matt did that. I want to, add on to that shout out or praise him as well. And you kind of built this community that was kind of missing in the virtual world.
Yeah. And I'll say it was also kind of missing in the physical in-person world too. Like a system like this where the whole company would see, even just a small win has not existed up until recently. Yeah. And so I think, moving to recognition, obviously it's going well for you guys now, but I think it was the right move there because this niche has not been served. You could tell your department in an email, but it'd be kind of weird to say like, hey, Jill really got ahead of things in accounting, and like the bordereau or like whatever reconciliation just got done early this week.
Yeah.
Like,
no one else would know.
Yeah. Like you could say to the department, that's cool, but like it's kind of a weird stigma about emailing the whole company.
Exactly.
Jill did a great job in accounting.
Exactly.
But then if it's like you have this feed of, hey, these are all the little wins that are happening in our company, like, well, that's really cool, you know?
And that's kind of the insight that we had to pivot that way initially. And then COVID kind of shined this light on another angle of it. So yeah, that's kind of the result of what happened. And then it started gaining traction in 2021. And that's when I came on. It was early then. And
so good for you to come on once they're winning.
Oh, exactly. Right. That's the funny thing is I remember thinking, oh man, they have product market fit. And they were well below $1 million ARR.
Oh yeah.
Well below. Like well below $500,000 ARR.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, Trevor came to me and was like, hey, what do you think about coming on? And I was supportive of it. I was like, this is a much better idea. But I still had to go through the interview process and whatnot. And so.
Not all nepotism.
Yeah, there you go. Had to go through the interview process, and I was probably the right mix of affordable. I had a lot of tenacity. I wanted to prove myself, and they offered me the position, and I came on. And I look back now, and I'm like, man, I was kind of crazy for going on as early as I did.
Yeah,
I thought we had product market fit. I still believe that we do, but if I looked at another company with those same numbers, I would be like, do you really have product market fit?
Yeah, like seems like a big risk with how much money you're making.
Huge risk.
And how much you have to operate to make that money.
Huge risk. And at the time, it was like we didn't have any benefits, no insurance. Salary was very, very low.
You were affordable to the company.
Yeah. And I took a chance. And in fact, I took a large salary cut moving over to Nectar. But I was just bought in on the mission. And ultimately, our mission became to help people feel more valued and appreciated at work. And that's what's really fun, is trying to build product to make people feel that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think in this world of like, my employer's evil, large corporations are evil, every business that makes a profit is evil, like this anti-capitalist rhetoric that I feel like is super common for maybe our generation and the generation younger than us. I think sometimes it's worth taking a pay cut, being affordable to a company.
Absolutely.
And taking a big risk.
Yeah.
I think that risk is the thing that sets people apart. Like if you're willing to take a risk, that is the only thing. If you want to be better than average, well, then there's risk involved in that, like if you're not willing to take a risk on this company that like, I think it'll probably work out, but if it doesn't, I'm maybe not screwed, but like,
yeah,
then, I mean, what's the risk there of like, maybe I didn't make, I'm going to throw out numbers that I don't know, but maybe you're making 80 and you took a pay cut and made 50. I don't know. You don't have to confirm, but maybe you take a little pay cut and for 3 years, you're like, I guess I missed out on 30 plus 30 plus 30. And like, I guess that's 90 grand that I missed.
Larger than that, but yeah.
So maybe you missed out on a little more than 90 grand if the company were not to work out.
Right.
But I think that's, think of your whole life story, like what a small thing to lose.
Small blip of time.
Like in those 3 years, let's say that the company dies after 3 years of you being there, like you lose 90 grand. You learn so much about what doesn't work, which is just as valuable, sometimes more valuable than learning what does work. Like coming into a company where I've worked for uncles who like, I'm the employee, it's him and me. I've worked for, kind of mid-sized companies. My current company has like 200 something ish employees. And then I was at Morgan Stanley a couple years ago. So like massive corporation. And at every level, like there's variances in how well things are being run, and like how deep these established practices are. And like at a company like Morgan Stanley, I'm not learning what doesn't work. Somebody already figured that out 20 years ago, for a lot of these things. And it's different in like tech where it's constantly evolving. But a lot of these processes. Like you just don't get to learn without going to a small company, and sometimes going to a company that's failing.
Yeah.
And hopefully you can turn things around. But, sometimes those failures are absolutely worth the risk. Like maybe even seek failure.
Absolutely. I mean, just going along with everything you said about taking risks and whatnot, I see a lot of people in the hiring process. I'll reach out to them and they kind of have this idea of their career being very linear.
Mm-hmm.
And I almost think it's a disservice because wherever you started on the chart could potentially hinder your progress, right?
Yeah.
If you started higher, a lot of I graduated from BYU in information technology. Most of my friends, they went out and got jobs at big corporations making, at this time it's like 90 to 100, right? I did not do that. One, I didn't want to be a software engineer.
Yeah. I get it.
And I went to a very small company and I was making 50 grand, which everyone was like, you're crazy. Why would you do that?
Like, you can get more. Like, dude,
you can get more by going
I'll
over
introduce
here.
you. Like, let's get you over here.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was like, no, I don't really want to do that. I feel like if I go work for a larger company, I'm put in this box. I don't get as many opportunities.
Yeah.
Or if I go work for a smaller company, I get a lot of opportunities.
And there's a lot of gray area in smaller companies of like who owns what.
Exactly.
And you can make your job to be whatever you want it to be.
Absolutely. And so because I was able to do that, I was able to really shine there. And then I got promoted a bunch at that company. And I had a trajectory that felt higher, but also
more like a hockey stick rather than linear.
Yeah. More like a hockey stick, but also at the same time, making the move to Nectar, that risk, even though it was a 50% pay cut, I was like,
well, now viewers are doing the math on on 50 grand.
Not exactly. I got some raises along the way. But
sorry to cut you off. Keep going.
But sorry.
No, that's my bad. So moved to Nectar, got the 50% pay cut.
So because I had started at 50 and then got some pay raises, but then ultimately moving to Nectar, I took a 50% pay cut. It was like, this isn't that bad because I was doing this just a few years earlier. And so it was like, yeah, it's a calculated risk, but I've lived this way before, which is very akin to like a lot of startup entrepreneurs. They'll risk it all because a lot of them come from nothing. And so they have nothing to lose, right? So because I didn't start at like a Morgan Stanley, a JP Morgan, or a Walmart, or even some of these big corporations that were paying me well, I didn't have as high of a base or a starting level, so it was easy to go down and then go back up. And so a lot of the times I'm looking at people or interviewing people who they want to just go linearly. They don't want to. They're at a larger company and they don't want to come down necessarily into a smaller salary where the opportunities are greater. They want to stay at their consulting firm where the salary's, a little bit higher, but the opportunities are not there. And so I'm like, man, if you can just, and this is not just with Nectar, this is true of like all startups. Like startups are trying to be scrappy. They don't have a lot of money. If you can sacrifice some things, there's a lot more opportunities out there that could pay much higher dividends than the current position that you're in. And some people are willing to take that risk and some people aren't. And it's just really hard because then they get like trapped in this like consulting trajectory of a career that they don't love.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm a big risk taker, as you might have been able to deduce. But if you want to do big things, like you have to be, if you want to build a Nectar, then you have to detail cars and figure out, they also want a little bit more. Okay, well maybe we can do an app that provides these other features. Oh, well that's not going great. We need to pivot. We need to pivot a little bit more. And that's a risk every time you do something new.